let's get a little bit on the background, and then we'll continue. We'll talk about like what the we'll talk about what the Republicans are doing
and
right now.
The breaking news is big in this unprecedented campaign, this season the likes of which we have never seen before. We have one more major development. Vice President Kamala Harris, the presumptive Democratic nominee now for President of the United States, has selected Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to be her running mate. Week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, maybe seen as a dark horse. Now he has emerged as the choice. Our MJ Lee, Jeff Zeleny, John King, Jamie Gangel, all reporting on this. MJ just saying maybe Walz, a vibes pick, seen as a Midwestern happy warrior. John King is here with us in New York, watching this unfold before our eyes. Let's just start, reset at the top of the hour, what Tim Walz means for this ticket now.
It means, number one, the Democrats have their ticket. They're about to go into their convention, and after Kamala Harris clinched the nomination with the most unorthodox nominating process of our lifetime, the President of the United States steps aside after winning the primaries. She wins a virtual voting among the delegates, and then she wants to make this decision. She wants all this cleaned up before they get to Chicago for the convention, so that can all be about prosecuting the case against Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and against the Republicans. So a very truncated process, a lot of pressure on the vice president. So as the voters out there get to judge, how she's handling this first big executive decision. So why Tim Walz? We're showing pictures of him right there in a jacket and a shirt with no tie on. Earlier we had pictures of him in a T-shirt. I do think the contrast here is going to be striking. This is a small town Midwesterner. This is a man who won a Republican House seat and held it in very difficult years for Democrats.
I asked this question to Sam Cedars and got jumped on. My question is, what has changed? Why is everyone so hyped about Walz? How would this address our foreign policy concerns? You will get jumped on because this is a moment where like people are finally tuning back into politics, and a lot of people are just straight ticket liberals in general, and they don't personally give a single fuck about American foreign policy. That is by design, mind you. The American foreign policy is brutal, it's ruthless, it's bloodthirsty, it's maniacal, and that is precisely the reason why it is not in the forefront of American minds ever. Foreign policy has the capacity to make or break elections only when it reaches a certain boiling point. We could technically still reach that boiling point, by the way. When people talk about like nothing ever happens, they mean like nothing ever happens to America, right? They don't mean like nothing ever happens, because things are happening all the time. A genocide is happening, for example. But that's the reason why people will yell at you and say that you're like spoiling the fun that they're having right now. Ultimately, I always manage my expectations. I grade on a curve when it comes to American politics. When I'm doing like election analysis, I'm not doing election analysis from simply my moral perspective, even though I'm very honest about my own personal motivations and my own personal, moral opinions, my own morality. I almost always try to associate it with like electability so that the broader American base of support develop a better understanding. But in terms of this changing the outcome of American foreign policy, I don't think there is any sort of, this is obviously significantly better than the former option that we were locked in with. Another leftist streamer made the argument that Walz would be a bad pick based on the good policies he's done, which is why it had to be Bashar because he's a bland candidate that Republicans would attack him on. What? No. But yeah, ultimately, most Americans do not care about foreign policy. And if you bring it up, they're like, oh, fuck you. You're a radical. You're a piece of shit. Even though you're right. You're not wrong. Right. But as far as foreign policy goes, do I think Walz is going to be like all that different from the average Democrat? Probably not. Okay. But as it stands, I was a big time Bernie advocate, as you guys know. And I literally also said the same shit about fucking Bernie in terms of foreign policy. And I said this time and time again, Bernie Sanders had like a bunch of differences, a bunch of moments where he differentiated from the average Democrat, especially on Israel. But like ultimately, it's not like he's going to be he was ever going to be like the true anti-war vanguardist leader that you think he was going to be. He was not. So you have to grade on a curve. You have to manage your expectations. You don't have to care about American elections, but if you do care about American elections, you have to understand that, there's obviously like American elections are going to be spoken about within the confines of America. And Americans are very selfish. They don't really give a shit about our foreign policy. And it is not something that moves the needle. Having said that, in terms of Israel, okay, in terms of Israel, it does move the needle a little bit in key districts, in key states like Michigan, for example. Okay. But yeah, Waltz has a really interesting background on foreign policy from his time living in China, where he was a teacher in China, and also has talked about not having an adversarial relationship with China, which is like genuinely weird to hear from a fucking Democrat. So, you know, there is definitely some good there. Okay, he speaks a little bit of Mandarin. He was anti-intervention in Syria. He has been at times anti-interventionist. He's been at times a party loyalist that voted along the party lines. So that is important to understand, though. That is important to put within the context of like the rest of the Democratic Party. In terms of his stuff with respect to Muslim populations, he has a big Somali constituency in his state. He has actively defended them on the record time and time again. That's why they're attacking him and saying he's like beholden to CARE. Okay. He's not going to be aggressive in being like anti-Israel or anything like that. Make no mistake. But having said that, we'll see. We'll see. Okay. I am not going to make any predictions on that front. I suspect him of being like super. Do I suspect him of being like above and beyond on the issue of Israel? Who knows? Probably not. He is just like every other fucking Democrat. He's just like every other Democrat and on that issue.
He held on to it. So he has that small town rural appeal, which is why did Donald Trump pick J.D. Vance. Sort of the same idea. Can you go into small communities and make the case? He's the chairman of the Democratic Governors Association. I can tell you his fellow Democratic governors love him. Love him. They think he's smart. They think he builds consensus. They think he's really funny. And so they like being in his company. And that matters in a campaign. In terms of Harris being out, are you confident that do you have the loyalty and do you trust your partner out there on the campaign trail? Does that person at tense moments, and there will be a lot of tense moments in the next 90 days of this campaign, make you laugh and make you smile and maybe take some of the pressure off you? Can you do the small market television? Waltz fits that bill. Now,
yes, Waltz can do retail much better than Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris still has that like elitist California stink on her a little bit when she's running around. She plays well. She plays well to younger voters for sure. But like ultimately, you put this man in the fucking Rust Belt, he's going to thrive. That's where he's from. You know, that's what he does. That's his shit. He's a goddamn teacher from fucking Minnesota. All right. So that he's got like a lovable older coach energy because that is what he is. He's got a decent amount of time in the legislative body. He has performed and outperformed the Democratic Party routinely as the governor. He's a popular governor. He's done a lot. His legislative accomplishments in 2023 onward is pretty solid as well. Like he is 100p a phenomenal pick. A great pick, okay? Top of the leaderboard pick. Absolutely stoked for this. Absolutely stoked for this. He also has a DUI on his record. That, yeah, say no more. That makes him even better. The Democrats have obviously set us up for low expectations time and time again. Up until the last moment, I straight up thought that they would still go with Shapiro because Shapiro was the scared pick. Okay? Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania, was the scared pick. Okay? That was the pick you do when you're not confident in your abilities of running and winning PA on your own. Okay? And honestly, I genuinely thought like it's still gonna be a bad pick. It's still gonna be a bad pick. It's not gonna be a good pick. And ultimately, they went with the good pick. I do think that they are responding positively to what they are hearing and what they are seeing from the progressive wing of the base of support in the Democratic Party. I do think that. Now, obviously, this presents an opportunity. Keep pushing on this front, specifically on Israel, okay? Every unlikable leftist I've ever seen is really out here like he's not leftist Jesus, therefore I will be not voting. Yeah. Don't listen to these people, okay? Don't. It's fine. Those people probably do a phenomenal amount of activism. They're at the forefront of all these movements and stuff like that. It's great. Those people are your allies. Those people are necessary. But this is elections. This is electoral politics. They don't fucking vote anyway. Who gives a shit? You're like, yeah, that's fine. Who cares? Like, I was duking it out with some people in my own Hoscord. There were people, there was a Nigerian Hoscorder who was like yelling about the VP pick not being like a revolutionary pick. And I was like, listen, brother, I love you, but like, it's like saying the global South is upset about, the fucking Minnesota State comptroller. Like, yeah, of course, this does not, this is not like a global South pick. There is no global South pick. We're talking about American empire, right? The most that America could do is step aside and allow the revolutionary potential of the third world to continue. Okay. That's the most you can expect from the imperial core, which is not going to happen anyway. I'm over here looking at a hemorrhaging country, a country that's bleeding, and a country that is on its last leg, basically fucking being actively more violent year over year, and trying to create a system, or at least like envisioning a system where it's like at least a little bit better in terms of organizing, so that there can be actual progressive momentum in this country, labor momentum in this country. That's it. That's what I care about. I thought crime was down. What? Crime is down. The fuck are you talking about? When I say hemorrhaging, I'm talking about, when I talk about America dying, I'm talking about like American empire. I'm talking about income inequality. I'm talking about the very obvious instability that we are staring down currently. How is a guy that created free breakfast and lunch not a radical pig in a good way? It's insane to me. What do they expect? America's getting more violent every year. Yes, I meant on its foreign policy. I don't mean that like America internally is getting more violent. America's always been pretty fucking violent in general. Crime is down, but that's besides the point. I'm talking specifically about America's active participation in global violence. Anyway, let's continue.
We're going to see how he plays out. And again, I'll be a broken record on this. There is no data in the 37 years I've been doing this that says your vice presidential pick makes the difference in the end. However, it can hurt you. We could have a conversation about has Vance hurt Trump, or at least stalled Trump's momentum a little.
Waltz is the one that sent the National Guard in during the George Floyd protest and has been making it harder to persecute cops and implements reforms in Minneapolis. Yeah, that's actually a really interesting take, because there's a big column A, column B on that front as well, because he does have some weaknesses. You just mentioned two solid ones, but he's also the same guy that, if I'm not mistaken, allowed the Keith Harrison prosecution to occur, right? Keith Ellison, not Harrison, sorry. Yeah, he also lamented on his abject failure of riot response. Somber Minnesota Governor Tim Walz confronted criticism after a third night of destructive protests in response to George Floyd's death in police custody. National Guard officers said the mission lacked clarity. Like I said, he's an interesting guy even on this front as well. But of course, no politician is perfect, and Walz is not perfect either. No leftist who votes thinks that we're going to vote ourselves into a socialist utopia with one election. Ultimately, meaningful change will come from some amount of violence here at home. And news like Waltz being picked for VP speaks to a future where that great change comes with potentially less violence here at home. But maybe I'm speaking out of my ass. I think it's a good idea. This is a good thing for normal leftists who vote. Yeah, I think ultimately, I want nice things. Okay, I just want. Fun fact: Tim Walz is the only person on either ticket that doesn't wear makeup. He's also the only person, aside from Donald Trump, since the Carter administration, that doesn't have a law degree, I'm pretty sure, of some sort. I mean, the motherfucker's a teacher, bro. He's a teacher. What are we talking about? That's it. He's a teacher. He's a football coach. He was in the army. Like, he's pretty fucking solid. I don't really give a shit about like him being a veteran. I do care a lot more about him being a teacher. Just like with Ketanji Brown Jackson, I cared that she was a public defender. Okay? Like, these are very important things. This is life experience, especially in more formative years, that truly changes the way you view the world. if you're not a fucking like out of touch rich weirdo like half of the fucking Republican Party, for example, like that's cool. That's a good thing. That means that you are going to be the kind of guy that legitimately would advocate for certain positions because you have lived experience on those positions. Okay?
Sometimes life is as much about the lessons you learn as the lessons you teach. When I grew up, community was a way of life. My high school class was 24 people. I was related to half of them. I learned to be generous towards my neighbors, compromise without compromising my values, and work for the common good. My dad was in the Army, and with his encouragement, I joined the Army National Guard when I was 17. I served for 24 years. I used my GI benefits to go to college and become a public school teacher. I coached football and taught social studies for 20 years. And I tried to teach my students what small-town Nebraska taught me: respect, compromise, service to country. And so when I went into government, that's what I carried with me. I worked with Republicans to
That's the thing. Like, he also is like pretty popular in Congress too. Like, people love him.
pass an infrastructure bill, cut taxes for working families, signed paid leave into law. I codified abortion rights after Roe got overturned. Because I go to work for the common good. But enough about me. Let's talk about you. Because that's what this election is about. It's about your future. It's about your family. And Vice President Harris knows that. She too grew up in a middle-class family. She too goes to work every day, making sure families can not just get by, but get ahead. We believe in the promise of America, in those values I learned in Nebraska, and we're ready to fight for them. Because as Kamala Harris says, when we fight, we win.
Let's just continue. I'm going to lock in.
And it can help you in the idea that, again, popular with governors, that helps you raise money. Popular with governors, that helps get more people on the team. Popular in small town America, create a little buzz for Democrats in places maybe where they're not always seen. And that is one of the Democratic Party's problems. In the years I've been doing this, Michael Dukakis was my first.
What? Bad take? You're basically saying the Republicans are right about immigration and we can't beat them? Saying immigration is good is actually better than avoiding the issue? No. My thing is, either set up a counter narrative that is objectively based and rooted within reality, okay? Or if you're going to talk about it, if you're going to talk about the issue of immigration, don't fucking literally play into their narrative. You're wrong. You don't understand the point I'm making. I'm making the opposite point.
First campaign, 1988. He won 10 states.
Massachusetts miracle.
Yeah, Iowa and West Virginia were states won by Michael Dukakis in 1988. Those who are blue-collar Democrats who worked with their hands on farms or in coal mines or in factories. The Democrats have lost those votes. Tim Walz knows how to win those votes. Again, the presidential candidate decides who wins the election. But a vice presidential candidate can help a little bit, and she's made a governing choice here too. A progressive governor who was in the military, in the House, then elected statewide and re-elected statewide. So you have governing experience here, again, in a different mix, a Midwestern mix. She's a West Coast politician. So it's an interesting combination. Politics, I always call it a casserole, right? You're bringing all these ingredients together and trying to make them work. The last thing I'll say is, in my travels over the last year, one of the issues is people are so disillusioned with politics. That's why you have so-called double haters, people who don't like Trump and don't like Biden. Well, now President Biden's out of the race. So that gives the Democrats an opportunity. They have this opportunity to shake up the race, to get people to look again. So somebody who's a little different, a little unorthodox. Kamala Harris is different. She's a woman of color, right? So she's different in her own right. Now to bring somebody else different into the mix when you're trying to get another look, it's an interesting pick. And
you mentioned him being a happy warrior. That's not something that you always hear in politics. There's been a lot of people who have been really, really annoyed, pissed off is probably the best word you could use. The candidates recently using very dark language, et cetera, et cetera. He's not that guy.
No, he makes the case against Trump and Trumpism with a smile. And he says he urges people to make it with a smile. And he urges people to say, don't demonize the voters. Don't demonize the people with whom you disagree. Try to have a conversation with them. Try to win them over with your own arguments and with your own details, not by saying you're a moron or you're an idiot or go away, I don't want to listen to you. Try to find out how they got there.
Minnesota nice.
What is what is the source of their disillusionment and their disaffection? Not just push them away because they disagree with you.
Yeah. Let's go to Jeff Zeleny now. Jeff, there is this question about what the relationship was before all this. How much did Kamala Harris know Tim Walz or have ever sort of talked to and had conversations with Tim Walz before the dark horse became the pick?
I said, let me see.
Sir, I'm told not much. They did not have much of a relationship. But another source just a moment ago pointed me back to a visit that Vice President Harris took to the Twin Cities in Minnesota in March. And she visited a Planned Parenthood clinic. Of course, she has been the leading champion on the, at the time, Biden-Harris campaign for abortion rights. And that has been one of the really anthems of her candidacy. And Governor Walz was at this Planned Parenthood clinic. It's the first time a sitting vice president has visited such a clinic. And I'm told that she walked away impressed by his demeanor, how he carried himself, and she liked him, but did not know much about him. And of course, at the time, this would have been unthinkable. Just 16 days ago, she was the running mate. She was not looking for her own running mate. So that is what is remarkable about this. But really, in the last 2 weeks, Governor Walz went from a third-tier contender in the views of someone who's close to him to one of the top three. And they believe that was largely because of what he was doing sort of very publicly. He was doing every interview he could do, trying to make the case to some Democrats and make the case why he is the type and flavor of Democrat that could help win voters back. If you think back to it,
Mehdi with another 50 gifted. God damn, I didn't even see that shit, dude. That's crazy.
If you think back to sort of the Democratic Party, how it was not that long ago when Barack Obama won in 2008 and 2012, they won a lot of areas that are now red. John was just talking about many of those areas. Governor Walz is someone they believe who can help sort of win back these areas. There, of course, are limitations to this. Vice President Harris is at the top of the ticket. She is the standard bearer. So we will see in the coming days how much he can sort of give some calm and relief to some voters who are unsure about this. But the contrast is something I'm told the Harris campaign very much liked, and the chemistry is something that she also liked in the final days of this search. Guys?
Not a lawyer. Tim Walz also not a lawyer, which is unusual, right? I guess Al Gore wasn't a lawyer. I mean, it's not often you... Yeah, social studies here. You don't often you see, politicians at this point who haven't had experience in the law, especially on the Democratic side. Let's go to MJ Lee for more reporting on how we got to this point. MJ, what are you hearing now?
Yeah, John, I do think of really the really remarkable and extraordinary series of events that led us to this moment. It was 16 days ago that President Joe Biden dropped out of the 2024 race. And as you've been talking about, Vice President Harris was able to lock up this nomination so quickly, but so much so that there was not even at any point even a blip of a real conversation within the Democratic Party about whether they should consider anybody else other than Kamala Harris. And now we have not only Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, but within a matter of days, she has deliberated on and chosen the running mate of her choice. And it is now going to be the Harris-Walz ticket running against the Trump-Vance ticket. So we have seen such a remarkable and unprecedented transformation of the Democratic ticket in just, again, a matter of days. And I do think we should note that this moment really marks, in some ways, Kamala Harris defying President Biden. As we have talked about so much for years and years, President Biden and the advisors that are closest to him have made the argument repeatedly that the person at the top of the ticket had to be Joe Biden, that only he was capable of defeating Donald Trump, that with anybody else, the country really risked a second-term Trump presidency. And in that, they were at least implicitly suggesting that the Democratic bench of talent was inadequate. But now here we have Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, now Tim Walz right there below her, and the two of them certainly do now represent sort of the future of the Democratic Party in a way that we would not have seen had Joe Biden remained at the top of the ticket. Now, One thing I will say, as we are now talking about this ticket facing up against President Trump and J.D. Vance on the other side of the aisle, I do think there's something to be said for the way that Walz has conducted himself.
How much of this was Kamala making the decision? How much was the DNC? I think Nancy Pelosi actively was petitioning for Walz, so I will give her the credit for that as well. I'll give Nancy the credit for replacing Biden. And I give Nancy the credit for fucking pushing for Walz. That's my goat, okay? I despise her worldview, but that's my goat when it comes to fucking making picks, making stock picks, and that's my goddamn goat when it comes to changing the history and the trajectory of the Democratic Party in such a dramatic fashion that this race went from a Donald Trump lock, okay, to what you are seeing unfold in front of your eyes. Anyway, let's continue.
In the last several weeks or so, as he has made the case effectively, a lot of Democrats would say, against Trump and Vance. You know, he is the guy that made the weird messaging really take hold as he described the Republicans on the other side of the aisle as those weird guys. That has been a really politically effective messaging, and he has clearly shown, whether he was intentionally auditioning for this job or not, that he can be that effective messenger for Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party. So all of these things would have gone into that decision-making process. I know that we were talking about this a little bit in the last hour, but I do think sort of that vibes decision, how much that factored into things, just the idea that this is somebody that she would have had good personal chemistry with, that he is widely described as somebody that people just enjoy spending time with.
Let's go to senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang.